Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Adoption of our in-camera minutes of September the 20th. Okay, all in favour? Thank you. Is there anything to be pulled from the consent agenda? I'm just going to ask a question, if I may. The kickboxing increase was 20%. Why was that?
So when we look at the fee increases that seem higher than average, what we were looking at was across the board looking to stabilize when we look at our comparators. For kickboxing in particular, I don't know if there's anything else to add other than bringing them into line. Jen?
We added some equipment to the purchase price.
Sorry? You added what?
So there was some equipment added. So when people register a piece of equipment necessary for the course.
Thank you. So how long have we been offering kickboxing?
Kickboxing for children, I believe it went up, and we've been offering it for a few years now.
Really? Okay.
The hand wraps used to be an add-on, now they're including in the cost.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I had a question on the field as well. Field fees are up 10%, Mr. Meredith?
Yes,
Why is that?
Well, as Council may recall, a number of years ago, there was a recovery rate set at 70% for youth and 100% for adults. Right now, we're at around 50% on a recovery basis, so we've adopted a 10% increase until we've reached that 70 and 100% recovery rate.
And have you discussed this with the field users?
We meet with them on an annual basis there, where for the last probably 5 or 6 years we've applied the same rate increase, so they are aware of those. Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other questions about the consent agenda?
I'll move it.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. The Transportation Master Plan. I owe you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. In 2000, the Crown approved its first transportation master plan, a strategic plan designed to address transportation requirements associated with the town's population and growth over the next 20 years. The transportation master plan establishes the town's transportation objectives for mobility for all modes of transportation, improving existing and future transportation infrastructure, improving road safety, and supporting a vibrant downtown through a multimodal network. In accordance with the municipal class environmental assessment process, a formal update was completed in 2007, and one is required in 2012. In April of this year, the town retained the services of MMM Group to build on the previous TM Transportation Management update and develop the traffic projections out to 2031, while still recommending infrastructure improvements to inform the development charge of background study that is currently being undertaken. Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Goff of MMM Group, who will provide the committee with a status update and preliminary findings of the Transportation Master Plan update in accordance with, in advance of the open house that's being scheduled for October 11th.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Just get the PowerPoint going here.
Okay.
Can we do anything without a PowerPoint?
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you once again. It's a pleasure to be here. Here's the presentation outline that we'll go through. First, as Ranjit said, we'll give you a bit of an update on the project status. Then we're going to talk a bit about what we're recommending on a draft basis with respect to a number of specific road links that were mentioned in the request for proposal we responded to. Talk about what we're proposing in the downtown and uptown areas. Give you an outline of what we've heard at the past Public Information Center, and B, what we're going to be presenting at this upcoming Public Information Center next week. Also talk on a bit about the policy initiatives that are being addressed in the master plan update, and then conclude with next steps. So the project status, we started in May of this year, and the first thing we did was basically collect all the data we needed with respect to traffic volumes, the road network, that sort of thing, and we've analyzed existing conditions to understand where the town is at now with respect to transportation capacity. We went out to the public on June 19th of this year at Public Information Center number 1, and as I mentioned, we'll talk a bit later about what we heard at the Public Information Center and how we're building that into our recommendations. The next step really was to use the regional transportation demand model and the town population and employment projections to forecast future traffic conditions, because we are working to an ultimate horizon of 2031 to try to define what the road network should be like at that point, and then we'll be stepping back to define interim horizon requirements as well. So as I said, we've analyzed future traffic conditions at 2031 at this point. So really today we're talking about our recommendations for that ultimate horizon. And to get there, we tested a number of different transportation scenarios using the model, as well as looking at how they would support other initiatives such as improved active transportation links in the town and supporting the town's development objectives, of course. And so to that end, we've developed our preliminary recommended transportation network that we're here to hear your comments on. So the 5 links that were mentioned in the initial proposal were listed here. Shoal Point Road, the question is realignment at Bailey Street and extension north of Bailey Street necessary? So that's the first thing we've looked at. Williamson Drive, should a connection be provided between Harwood Avenue and Thackeray Drive to complete the missing link there? Clements Road, is a connection between Green Court and Church Street needed into the town of Pickering? Number 4, Hunt Street, should the extension of Hunt Street between Mackenzie Avenue and O'Brien Court be constructed, which would really provide access out onto Westney to provide better access in and out of the downtown and to the GO station? And 5th, Church Street, can the connection between Taunton Road and 5th Concession be eliminated from the official plan? So I have a number of slides which deal with each of those in sequence. So the first one is Shoal Point Road, and the question, as I mentioned, was whether Shoal Point should be, let me just get the pointer going here, should be realigned at Bailey Street. Here's the way it is now, directly north-south. So the question is, should it be realigned to the east? And then also, should it be extended up to a potential extension of Achilles Road here, just south of Highway 401? So our analysis indicates that while it would be useful to really open those lands in this area to development, it doesn't really provide a significant benefit when you look at it on a broader transportation network basis. It doesn't really accommodate a great deal of demand. Another factor to consider is that it likely would be crossing or very close to some wetlands or environmentally sensitive lands, so that's definitely a consideration. We also looked at the alternative that's been considered in the town's master plan, which is the extension of Audley Road and the extension of Achilles Road further east to meet that. So using the model, we looked at those 2 alternatives, and the extension of Audley definitely gives you a much better result in terms of overall transportation network performance at the horizon of 2031. The Shoal Point Road extension really doesn't attract a lot of traffic. One thing we did do actually as part of the process was to consult with the region, and they did raise some issues that we will want to consider as we finalize our recommendations. Specifically, they were mentioning, I think, some traffic operational issues at the intersection of Salem Road and Bailey Street, which they thought could be perhaps alleviated somewhat by the extension of Shoal Point. So I think that's just one final point we need to kind of tidy up in our recommendation. But overall, our recommendation, based on what we've done, is to remove the link north of Bailey Street from the official plan. So that would remove this link, and to really instead focus on planning for Audley Road as a much better kind of through connection across 401 eventually to provide a better system result overall in terms of transportation performance. And we also looked at whether the realignment is really justified. There's that question now of how the intersection is performing at Shoal Point at Bailey. And so we looked at various scenarios whether realignment would help. But what we found, at least in the short term, is that if you can just adjust the signal timings there at that intersection, that should alleviate the issue. Part of the issue really is that everyone, if they're going east, really wants to get into the left lane because they're probably aware that east of the intersection, the road's going to narrow. So that's really affecting intersection performance there. But we think by adjusting the signal timings, as I said, that can alleviate the issue. The next point was Williamson Drive, so the potential connection here that you can see in the red box, the missing link in that section across Harwood Avenue and across the rail corridor. So this would be a type C arterial road. It would provide some limited relief to Taunton Road in the north and Rossland in the south, but we looked at the volumes with and without Williamson Drive connected to see what that would do to Taunton and Rossland Road. And it really wouldn't provide a significant amount of relief. Most of the traffic would still remain on Taunton and Rossland. Obviously, it would provide some potential for active transportation links, people walking and cycling between the neighborhoods, and reduce some of the distance that drivers have to travel if they're circulating between those two neighborhoods on the west and the east. But it's also very costly to cross that rail corridor. You'd have to be grade separating that, and that would be a significant cost. So really, when we looked at the issues of the traffic it would attract, the relief it would provide to Taunton and Rossland versus the cost and the impact, we think the benefit-cost ratio is very low. So we're recommending that this link be removed from the official plan. Essentially, the traffic can be accommodated on the links that are there surrounding that block. Though, again, we did consult with the region on this. They ideally, I think, would like to see the link connected for those reasons, including neighborhood connectivity and the active transportation connections as well. But I think we do have to weigh that against the cost, which we would expect to be quite substantial. So we are recommending removing that from the official plan. Clements Road, so here's the potential link between existing Clements Road in the town over to the extension over to Church Street, where it would meet up into the town of Pickering. So this would be a collector road. And again, we've looked at this with the model to test what happens essentially to Bailey Street. That's the key issue here. Does Clements Road extension provide a significant amount of relief to Bailey Street? And it would provide relief kind of in the short distance between Church and perhaps over to Harwood. But overall, Bailey Street would still remain congested along most of its length. It really wouldn't provide a lot of relief to Bailey, and this probably wouldn't justify construction of the road based on the amount of traffic that it would really attract. And it's definitely going to be crossing a very sensitive area in terms of the environment. So we also did think about whether just a pedestrian and cycling connection would make sense through here as one sub-option. But given that you've already got pedestrian and cycling links on Bailey and along the lakefront, we didn't really think that was an essential part of the network either. So again, our recommendation here is to remove that link from the official plan. We think the traffic can be accommodated in future on Bailey Street, and that will also help, I think, to kind of focus demand along Bailey Street, which should support that idea of a higher order transit service in the future on Bailey Street as well. Hunt Street. So here's the concept to connect it basically from its western terminus over to West Steam Road across the rail corridor. And this again would be a collector road. It would also provide additional access into the GO station, which is just to the northwest here. So that would really be a significant benefit in terms of simple traffic operations in this kind of west end of the downtown area. And it certainly would provide improved connectivity for people who are coming along Westney, coming into the downtown, because really you've only got either Bailey Street on the south or Farrell and Station Street on the north. So as downtown continues to develop, we think this would really be a significant advantage in terms of having a better distribution of traffic in and out of downtown. Now, it would require an at-grade crossing of the rail spur, which is somewhat active, but we think that's an issue that can be mitigated. And it's expected to generate a two-way volume of about 650 to 700 vehicles in the peak hour, which is actually one of the higher volume projections of these 5 roads. So we think that definitely does support moving on constructing this link. And based on those demands, as well as issues like congestion on Bailey and the need to improve access to the GO station and into the downtown, we would suggest that the town look at constructing that link in the short to medium term. Though I should mention that our detailed assessment of timing for all the recommendations is still to come. So that's really based on a bit of a strategic assessment of timing. So we'll flesh that out as we complete the report. And the next road issue was Church Street, north of Taunton Road, up to the 5th concession. So this is listed as a Type B arterial road in the official plan. And again, what we've done is look at, can the demand that's projected on that link be accommodated on the parallel roads? So essentially, I believe it's Westney over to the east here really is the road that would have to accommodate the displaced traffic. And it's not really a significant volume even in 2031. If memory serves, it's about 250 to 300 vehicles, 2 direction in the peak hour. So that's pretty light and could easily be accommodated on Westney. So what our recommendation is here is to close the road to through traffic north of the Hydro Corridor. So that's basically the section in the red box. Here's the Hydro Corridor running east-west. But we would have to maintain the section running up from Taunton to about the Hydro Corridor in order to provide access to the properties that do now have access off of Church Street. So that could be maintained as essentially a local road in the town's network. So that was really the 5 key road issues that we were asked to assess. The other big issue in the study really is the evolution of downtown and uptown Ajax. So what we've done here to develop the concept plans is looked at the potential for new road, transit, cycling, and pedestrian improvements, which can support intensification of those 2 areas and support further growth. And as Ranjit said, create multimodal, more active areas for the town. And we have also looked at the town's intensification study and the draft results of the Lower Harwood Avenue streetscape study to make sure that we're conforming with them as well. And we've categorized the improvements right at this point as being either short-term or long-term. So here's the downtown concept plan. And as we said, the goal really is to create a multimodal, pedestrian-focused downtown, and there's a number of elements there that can help to achieve that goal, including mid-block pedestrian crossings. So you can see those in the blue color on Harwood. There's a number of those, either specific pedestrian crossings or just improving signalization along the entire corridor and improving the quality and the design of crosswalks that are already there at your signalized intersections. Cycling priority improvements on some of the new roads that we're recommending, new roads and road extensions to facilitate mobility. So that includes things like connecting Kitney Drive to Centennial Road here, creating more of a formal road on the east-west piece of Centennial. In the longer term, hopefully connecting through a new link between Centennial and Harwood here. We think that's important because you do have a lot of high-density residential here and certainly more people living further east. And so to be able to provide that east-west connectivity both by auto and bike and on foot, we think is important. There's also the new link through the proposed downtown Ajax development and a number of links that could be seen through the commercial properties on the west side of Harwood as that area redevelops, to try to break it into more pedestrian-oriented, smaller blocks with development facing the street to support pedestrian activity. Another key element in the strategy is really parking. And so we're recommending that as this area evolves, there be consideration for centralized public parking. I understand there is some opportunity for a little bit of shared parking on a limited basis as part of proposed development now. But depending on what kind of development plans come forward as this area evolves, you may want to look at increased centralized public parking to facilitate that development. That's a strategy that's worked really well in a lot of other municipalities, as well as things like permitting increased on-street parking in some of these minor roads that we're proposing, as well as staged evolution of the parking standards for development to support intensification. So as the area becomes more pedestrian supportive, more transit oriented, less reliant on private automobiles, you can look at whether parking standards can be relaxed to provide less parking for each private development that occurs. And that can also reduce the cost for those developments, thereby making the area more attractive. And lastly, we're suggesting that as the area evolves, probably the idea of some kind of transit hub at the intersection of Harwood and Bailey makes a lot of sense, given that Bailey is proposed to be a higher order transit street, and this whole corridor really is going to evolve in something that is more pedestrian and transit oriented. So we haven't gotten very specific on that yet, but just something to be aware of as the plan evolves and becomes more detailed as the area continues to develop. In terms of Uptown, it's really kind of a similar concept in terms of breaking up the commercial blocks that you've got now, both north of Kingston Road and south of Kingston Road, into potential future development blocks that are more pedestrian-oriented, more transit-supportive, more bike-friendly, all of those sustainable goals that the town wants to move towards. And this really is building on the plan for the Kingston Road Bus Rapid Transit Service, which will come along and also include bike lanes along Kingston Road as well. So that's a great initiative. But you can see here some ideas on how we can break up those blocks into smaller blocks and perhaps consider additional signalization along Kingston Road. And one thing we've also done, just to kind of corroborate that this makes sense, is just do some parking utilization studies. We've done those both for the downtown and here in the Uptown, just to understand how much parking really is being used now. And the parking utilization rate on a typical weekday is something in the range of 40 to 45%. So you've got a lot of land there that's really not being very well utilized. So a plan to intensify and improve mobility for pedestrians, make this a much more active and livable area, we think is something that can really succeed very well. Now, just to go back to public consultation, this slide lists what we heard at the June 19th Public Information Center. We had a lot of interactive boards there that people could put post-it notes on or just write comments on, and of course we had comment sheets. And we also did online surveys as well. So some of these comments we heard both at the Information Center and through the surveys. So I think when you look through them, there's going to be kind of a common theme, and I think that theme is to make the town more pedestrian friendly and more bike friendly and more supportive of transit as well. And the first point actually speaks to transit. And of course we realize that transit is really a regional responsibility, but is something that we need to be facilitating through our plans in terms of the blocks and the concepts for the streets that we have. So that's definitely something that's kind of underlying our work in terms of the town's transportation network. So one of the key recommendations here is the identification of that new transit hub in the downtown, and we'll be articulating a bit more as the study completes what that might mean for transit service in the downtown area particularly. Second point was to provide enhanced pedestrian connections, especially in the downtown. A lot of the people who came to the Public Information Center live east of Harwood, and we certainly heard loud and clear from them that they want to be able to get across Harwood in a more effective way, and better transit service is also important to them as well. So we've talked to you already about providing some additional mid-block pedestrian crossing points across Harwood. Another point was to consider planned road and highway improvements up to the 407 extension. So that's kind of the overall analysis framework that we've been working with as part of the application of the region's demand forecasting model, is to ensure that we've got the overall road network throughout the town that makes sense up to the horizon of 2031. I've been focusing on those 5 road network improvements, but we've certainly been looking back to the 2007 TMP network to make sure that that network is still appropriate, and so we're confirming and corroborating that network as well to make sure that it functions for the town throughout the area. Fourth point is provision of additional off-road trails for bikes and pedestrians. So this point really was about maximizing pedestrian and bike infrastructure. So we're suggesting a little more emphasis on what we call complete streets, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But that's really to make sure that new roads and the reconstructed roads are designed and maintained for all users and all types of transportation, again, to make things more sustainable. Next point was to review circulation in neighborhoods around schools. So we've reviewed a number of policies that relate to that issue, and we're recommending updates there. Shoal Point Road extension, we've already talked about that one. And last point was about providing bike storage lockers at Ajax GO station. So obviously that's really a responsibility of Metrolinx in terms of what they provide at the GO station, but Metrolinx is one of the stakeholders that we will be consulting with throughout the remainder of the study. So that recommendation will definitely be put forward to them. And we are certainly making the town, I think, much more sustainable in terms of bike access throughout the town. So that will undoubtedly lead to more bike demand at the GO station, and hopefully some more bike storage lockers can and will be provided by Metrolinx. So the Public Information Center that's coming up next week, really the objective of that is to present the preliminary future transportation network that we've touched on some of the key points of today, and obtain public comments on that network, as well as the policies that will underlie it. So the date is next Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 at the community center. And we've been doing quite a number of things to try to maximize the number of people that we get out. So you can see them listed here, advertising, both in print and online, the town hall message board. Last time we gave out 500 flyers at the GO station, and we're going to be doing that as well, hopefully not to be trampled by the crowds. So we're doing that very carefully and safely. But that seemed to be a big success. We did get some people coming from that activity last time. We'll also be going back to people who've participated before with a direct appeal to them to say, hey, come back out and tell us what you think of the plan. Direct appeal to landowners on the affected roads, and a direct appeal to the stakeholder agencies, Durham Region, the Conservation Authority. I think there's a list of about 10 or more stakeholder agencies we've got. And this actually is one of the boards from the PIC. So this talks to that complete streets policy that I mentioned a moment ago. And as it says over here on the right, what is a complete street? It's really a street that's designed for all modes of transportation to make sure everyone has appropriate priority on the road. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have bike lanes and reserved transit lanes on each road, but that the town will consider what the character of that road should be. So, you know, there may be roads that serve primarily an industrial purpose, and on those roads we may not recommend all of those elements, but on roads that perhaps are in residential areas, that may be someplace where we want to provide for enhanced transit and enhanced cycling priority, as well as expanded sidewalks. So it's really a question of considering what's appropriate on that road. This is something that the town is already doing, as we've mentioned here, as part of their current practice, but we really just want to enshrine that a bit more formally in the town's transportation policies to make sure that it really flows throughout future transportation master plans, as well as operations. And here at the bottom, I've just mentioned the other town policies and warrants that we have looked at. So we've reviewed your existing policies and compared those with best practices from other municipalities, and we're recommending some minor updates to those. And those policies and warrants are the road classification policy, the all-way stop control warrant, the traffic calming warrant, and the school crossing guard warrant. So trying to get at kind of all of the elements of what constitutes the town's transportation system. So the next steps, obviously the Public Information Center next week. We'll take the comments from that Public Information Center, as well as meetings with the various stakeholder agencies, as well as the Town Steering Committee, and prepare our draft report. That will be submitted to town staff in November of this year, and also to the stakeholders for their further review and comment. We'll present the final report to council, scheduled for December of this year, and hopefully once council approves it, we'll be filing it with the Ministry of the Environment for the mandatory 30-day review period, because the project has been completed as a master plan under the class environmental assessment process, and that's really intended to help you move forward into implementation by basically completing phases 1 and 2 of the Class EA process for any projects that are included in the master plan. So that'll save you money and some time, as well as you proceed into implementing those projects. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Manager. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to revisit 2 things. Williamson Drive, you indicated that the link that's on the official plan, you're recommending that link be removed. And I guess one of the reasons was traffic volumes and impact on the other roads, as well as some financial concerns as well. Maybe to planning, are there development opportunities in that area that would help, if that link wasn't removed, does help reduce the burden if the town had to embark on something like that?
True. Well, as you know, the area is planned and if not built out, approaching build out. So the only opportunities I could see is measuring traffic volumes and monitoring traffic and looking at opportunities for traffic calming speed reductions in the future. But in terms of the communities themselves, the road networks in place, the buildings are there. Okay. In essence.
Yeah, I guess I think it's probably a little premature to remove that link from the official plan just yet. I don't know how comfortable I am with that. When you look at Williamson Drive from Harwood to, from Wesley Road to Harwood, there's no traffic calming there at all. And I get a lot of complaints from the residents that are speeding, but a lot of complaints because of that. It's just almost like a freeway, right? But when you go east of Harwood on Salem, Williamson Drive, there's quite a number of roundabouts and some effective traffic calming just to reduce traffic. But at that stretch there, it's a big issue, right? The other thing is, when you're looking at our current policies in terms of traffic calming warrants, I guess that's your preliminary review. Are the warrants too high, or are you finding that they're inconsistent with some neighboring municipalities?
No, I think they're generally consistent. If I recall correctly, I think we're recommending just some very minor tweaks to the process more than the overall warrant itself. Okay,
I just provided planning with a list of streets, and I don't know if I could share it with you that you know, as a counselor up in that area, I get a lot of complaints. My number one complaint next to snow removal. I got a lot of complaints about speeding in the area, and I know with the stop signs or what have you, it might give you a false sense of security, but it is a reality. I can't speak for the other wards, but it is a reality in Ward 2 with the speeding. And we definitely need to look at some traffic accommodation in the areas that I guess provided the planning today.
Sure.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Colin.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you for the presentation. Just wondering, as far as you're not recommending that Shoal Point continue up north of Bailey, are you still going to leave in as far as the realignment through, I believe it's the Latin property there? Or is that going to just remain as is?
Well, we're recommending that it remain as is, actually. We did look at that in some detail because it was raised by staff as a real concern now. So we looked at it both in terms of the geometrics and also the traffic volumes, both the volumes that are there now and the volumes that we're expecting there in the future, given what's known about development applications there and the town's long-term population and employment forecasts. And really when we looked at those, that's when we got to the conclusion, based on both the long-term planning and how the intersection operates now, that the basic, most cost-effective thing you could do really would be to just change the signal timings. Okay. In future, Bailey's going to be widened further east as well. So that's going to change the distribution of traffic as well at that intersection a little bit. So I think maybe an appropriate recommendation is that issue should be monitored and reviewed again when Bailey is widened. That doesn't attract a lot of right turn volume, for one thing, eastbound to southbound. So that's one of the things that really drove our recommendation.
Okay. And as far as Audley Road north, I agree with extending it, but what about a crossing of the 401?
Well, it obviously that's going to be a cost.
Cost.
Yes. But looking at network performance, it did seem to be something that provided a good level of service, balancing traffic demands out across the various north-south links in that part of the town. So that was really what drove that recommendation.
Well, the last thing, and it's not my ward, but the last thing I want to see through that area is a route for the truck traffic to get to Bailey at the back.
Mm-hmm.
There's an enormous amount of truck traffic, and part of the approval process for that was that it goes out through the 401 at Salem, through Achilles. And by tying those up, do you feel that that's what we're opening ourselves up to? It's, possibly getting like what we have right now for the at Church and Bailey, where all the truck traffic from that distribution center comes and uses Westney Road. Mm-hmm. Do you not see that connection opening up that problem to us?
Well, I think as things continue to evolve and as the region continues to grow, I think partially that truck distribution is going to change somewhat. But I think that's an issue that we'll consider as well. So it may be worth going back just to think about that a bit.
And as far as Church Street North, is that, from my understanding, the recommendation from the TRCA that they want that section of road closed?
We haven't actually spoken to TRCA yet about that.
No, this was an area that we looked at in light of the restoration work that's currently happening on the Rockside property, and whether or not, while insisting on a connection through there, does it not sever these two properties, or do we have an opportunity to create a larger expanded green conservation area? So this is something that we're looking at.
Well, that's the only unpaved road in Ajax, I believe. And is that, did we have plans to pave that in our 5-year forecast? No, so it's just going to remain like that anyway? Okay, I know a lot of people don't use it because it's not paved and it's usually in pretty poor conditions, so that probably won't be missed by too many. And as far as the recommendations for the right-in, right-outs along Highway 2 Durham Center, that was something that we discussed during, what was that committee in 2003, the Transportation and Traffic Advisory Committee or something we had way back then. And that was one of the recommendations, was having access to the Durham Center and that strip through the major intersections, through Harwood, through Salem, and not have as many lights in the middle to get traffic moving. How does your recommendations coincide with the region plans for the new bus rapid transit and all the expansion and works that are going to happen along Highway 2 in the very near future?
Well, we've certainly looked at the intersection spacing, And the spacings are consistent with the region's policy, for one thing. So that's something that should give them some comfort. But I think it is consistent also in terms of the function of that street. If you're putting bus rapid transit in that street, you've got to have people who can easily walk to access the service. So providing more accesses north-south, whether they be right in, right out, or signalized if possible, just makes sense in terms of letting people filter down through the neighborhood to get to that service, to provide the ridership it's going to need to survive. You know, it's a crowded corridor now, so the last thing I would want to see is them implement a bus rapid transit service that doesn't attract enough people and that people regard as not successful in the long term. So you got to drive the land use to really support the transit service that you're implementing, and part of that equation is access for people to come from the land use onto Kingston Road. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
The problem with following Sean is that he asked all my
Oh, well.
questions. I sit on the Brockline committee, the advisory committee, and I was just going to say it was interesting that you were pointing out the same road that they pointed out, the very same section on Church Street, that is coming out of their recommendation also. And that it's still very accessible to people who like to bike and run and whatever, but it would be shut down for transportation. So I just wanted to make that comment. I wondered if there was any link at all. Of course, that's true too.
Councillor Dice.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I have more questions about that. And curious as to why they were including that in their recommendations. Because if I understand that they're moving the leash-free area to the other corner, which means it cuts off access then from Church Street.
Did you want me to answer?
Right?
This was simply a question posed to the consultant as to whether this link is required from a traffic perspective. What happens in terms of how the internal space is being used is another matter, but this is simply a question of the
So you're
network.
saying that it's not used often enough to keep it open?
To warrant it.
Because it is a link for people who do go north.
Actually, the residents don't have any issue with it.
The other question I have is with respect to looking at the Kitten extension, and you recommended that we have an access into the Ajax Community Center off of Harwood.
Right.
So that would then mean you have the Kitten, or the new access, and also the access of the new road going
Yes.
through. So is that, you still think that's a safe condition? Would they be far enough apart that it wouldn't be an issue with
Oh,
traffic
yes,
coming down that curve?
Yeah, it definitely would be. And that new intersection that we're talking about, the southerly one, it is on a straight section, so I wouldn't be concerned about sightlines there. And, you know, if the downtown really is going to evolve into something more dense and more intense, it really just makes a great deal of sense, especially you've got all that high density residential on the east side. Just finding a safe, attractive way for those people to get across to the west side of Harwood makes a great deal of sense, to the hospital and to the community center and the new mixed-use development and everything that's going on there. I'm sure there's going to be a big demand for it there, so better to plan for it proactively.
And I just had a question also about the Hunt Street connection out to Westmead. You gave a figure of how many cars. Is that, where does that fit in the scheme of things? At a high volume, a middle volume?
That's an appropriate volume for the type of road that would be. I think the number was 650 to 700. That's a two-way PM peak hour volume. You know, and that's probably a little bit conservative because it's really hard to model the traffic coming in and out of the GO station. So, you know, I would see in 2031 if there are a lot more people living in your downtown, they're going to be coming out of that GO station, and a lot of them, I think, would be using that link to go east, to go home. That's an issue that's a bit hard to get at in the modeling.
So how would we compare that to what we're getting now? Is that double or?
On which
Just to
link?
give me an idea of what the
Probably on Hunt
volume
Street
of
right
traffic
now.
is now.
Probably that I would say that's at least double on the existing section of Hunt Street, or double what you've got on Farrell to the north as well. I think. I don't remember the exact number.
No, I just wanted to know.
Sure.
Thank you. Mayor Parrish?
Just a couple of questions. And this is to staff as well as the consultant. The road that Councilor Dyes mentioned, the connection between Centennial and Falvey Court. My recollection is that over the last 5 to 7 years, that road has been in and out, in. And, we've got a major development that's been approved, I think, without that road. Our site plan is without that road, so we need to really resolve this one way or the other. I agree with your recommendation, and I always agree that that is a natural, but it has implications for that development, has implications in dividing 2 sports fields by a road, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all important points. I think the connectivity and the transportation network says that it should be done, but I think we need to resolve it one way or another. And I'm just wondering, when are we going to say for sure that we're doing that or not?
Through the previous downtown policy work that was done, I think the EA that was done for the kidney extension, there was a look at the intersection placement of that connection along Centennial Drive. And I think it moved north, to the north side of the playing fields. And when the Bailey Harwood development was looked at, it was pulled further north to enable an urban walk pattern through that site. So the idea of a connection is there. I think this reinforces the fact that perhaps the Falvey Court connection should have stayed where it was, and this would simply be another one. But I think through any amendments we need to make through our official plan to implement some of this work, that is a connection that naturally.
Do we need to do an EA on that issue again?
An EA? No, we wouldn't. I think this satisfies that as part of that function, the functional component of it. But in terms of detailed design and construction, I might have to defer to our engineering folks.
On the Shoal Point issue, there seems to be a real pushback from the region, and I think there's a private official plan amendment at the region that was launched by Loblaws or Atlas or whoever, that's been sitting in advance now for years. Is this process going to resolve this, or is, and in a related matter, the ongoing decades-long issue over the Clements crossing of Brothers Creek, is this process going to resolve some of these long-standing issues that really we have one point of view and the region has the other? Yes. Do we still go out into the distant future just having different positions on this, or will this help to resolve these issues?
This is intended to help resolve it. We've had these issues for a while. The regional plan amendment application I think you're referring to, that was filed by Loblaws in 2005 or 6. Yes, this is intended to put a position out there to say, okay, this is what the town is prepared to support. There will be accompanied with some technical recommendations in terms of how to improve some of the intersection conditions that were being referred to at Bailey and Salem. So that will provide the town's position in that regard. The Clements extension, I think our position has been out there since 2000.
Yeah.
So that's certainly no news, and I think this simply reinforces the town's position.
The Hunt Street extension, which is, my recollection, is the one green light road that we need to go forward. So our next step, is this an EA for this, or is this just a part of an EA for us?
I would say it's part of it. That will be part of a larger process.
And things like the fact that there's a building or two in the way of that connection will be dealt with through that EA.
Yes, there's some real constraints that need to be.
You know, I think it's a very much a needed connection. It'll have a lot of good positive impact on the road network, but there's some issues there. Are we planning to initiate that and to get it forward to at least a process where we could say, yeah, we're going to do this and find out when we're going to get this in the long-range capital program? Is this something that we plan to do sooner rather than later?
This is an item that's up for discussion now, and in terms of time, Paul, perhaps if you want to speak to that.
To the chair, I guess it's timing. We have, we're just in the middle of the budget process again, and that item is being brought forward. And it would be our desire to have it done, as you mentioned. I think we have to see where it falls out in terms of our ability to fund it.
Just one last point. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Meredith had something to add to the church street issue?
Yeah, and again, Councillor Crawford had alluded to it, but the fact that there is a draft master plan that isn't now in draft form, and then we'll be coming to General Government Committee in November, so we're about 2 or 3 meetings away where we will be presenting it, but it does support sort of the closure of Church Street as supported through this draft master plan and how it all fits in. So
This is the revised Greenwood draft.
that's correct. So this November, council should be in a position to take a look at that draft plan.
And the residents that live on Church Street up to roughly the Hyder corridor, I think there's a few north of the rail spur, they'll have full input into this in terms of how we treat the end of the road if we close the road in terms of a traffic circle or whatever that they'll be fully consulted is my question.
The residents already have been consulted. There have been a couple of opportunities and they have attended. At this point in time, have supported the closure of Church Street, and they understand that at that closure there will be a new entrance or trailhead, some associated parking that we'd be looking to introduce into the Broxton lands. And to this point in time, we don't have any reason to believe that there's any objections to that proposal.
Thank you.
Mr. Law.
Just to that point, Your Worship, as you know, there's an amendment required to the official plan so there'll be a process associated with the closure of that road.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. The Audley Road, the work that MTO have done regarding Durham 23 and the link to the 407, they had eliminated the flyover at Audley. Does anybody else remember that? They took that out.
I believe it was delayed. They didn't include it in their works, but
Yeah.
they didn't include it from happening.
Okay.
So
I thought it
think
was
they just
eliminated at
kept
that
it out
point.
there.
Okay.
We had asked that it be undertaken at the time that this work was going on, and we didn't do that.
Okay. The extension of Achilles and from beside Loblaw from Audley, has there, like, when Durham 23 opens up as a link, an access to the 401, don't you think that there should be an east-west, another east-west, other than Bailey, between Achilles, between Salem and Durham 23?
Well, that's an interesting question. I can't recall that the forecasts of demand show any particular need for that, but you know, if it is more an issue of commercial access and trucking, that's something that is, again, not that well captured by a long-term transportation demand model. So perhaps that's something we should just go back and review in terms of the area road network.
Because that's zoned industrial, well, and greenbelt, of course, but it is zoned industrial. Is there any further questions? None? Motion to accept the
I'll move to receive.
receipt. All in favor? Karen, thank you. Thank you. 10%. 6.2. General levy forecast. Mr. Ford. What?
She spent 3 hours at the Reeds and discussing this on Tuesday.
He's going to do a presentation as well.
That's like,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our annual kickoff, at least in front of council, the GGC is the general levy forecast. It's actually the 9th year that we've been actually doing the general levy forecast process, but the distinct difference this year is we're not actually coming to council to set a target tax rate. As council will recall, in October of 2011, with the opening of ARC and for other strategic reasons, council did set the tax rate target increases, not the targets, the increases for the balance of the term. And this is what the, just to refresh council's memory, the 2013 is our base where we've been the last number of years of 2.75%, with an additional 1% for the Audley Recreation Center Phase 1, and then dropping back down to 2.75% in 2014. Just a comment, these are in 2012 dollars. We normally try and estimate the 2013 dollars, but because 2013 is a reassessment year, which can really skew things, I didn't want to do that, but there will not be a significant difference between the 23 and 2012 dollars in terms of the dollar impact on a taxpayer. You might add 20 cents for each percentage point, so it's not a significant impact. So that's the big difference today, that we're not looking for the target. Council set that. But we still have to do a general levy forecast. It's a very important long-term financial planning tool, so notwithstanding the fact council has set the rates, we still need to go through that exercise. So I'm just going to bring the numbers up, and council can certainly see that notwithstanding the 2013 target of 3.75%, the forecast, the general levy forecast, which is a very high-level forecast, has it just sitting over a little bit over 7%. Council knows that a large part of that is the opening of ARC Phase 1, which is about $1.5 million in net operating costs. That's net of revenues, and that's staffing, building cost, and the debenture cost. The debenture on ARC is a little under $12 million. So that equates to about 3.1%. And as we have every year, there's always a pent-up demand from prior years that does roll forward. So just looking at 2013 quickly for a second, to say the difference between 7.06 and 3.75% is 3.31%. To put that into dollars, it means we need to find about $1.6 million in order to hit the target of 3.75%. A challenge, without question. We've had that challenge before in prior years. The difference we have this year is we already have a staff freeze. So normally in the past, where we've had a gap of this large between the forecast and the tax rate increase, the first place we've generally gone to is look at staff. Well, as Mr. Fleck's going to talk to, we've already dealt with that one. The other comment I want to make just quickly as well too, so you see the scale coming down in the latter years, which is always a good thing. 2014 has somewhat of the annualization of ARC as well too, the full year cost as well as the second year debenture cost. So 15 and 16 look very good. They're very close relative to the 2.75 traditional target we have. But that will be good for the length of this presentation, because of course as we get the 706 down to 3.75, all those demands in dollars just simply move out to the future years. So that chart looks very good today, but I can guarantee you next year when we bring back the general levy forecast, you will not likely see 2.86 and 2.82 in 15 and 16. So as we always say with the general levy forecast, and we've been consistent on this approach for a couple of years, this is just simply based on providing the existing services we do to the larger population base. So what's probably more important is not the exclusions, but the exclusions. It does not include any new services or any increases to existing service levels. So it's basically what we're doing now, and we're just doing it for more people and businesses. There's no new corporate or departmental programs or initiatives included in here. That includes anything that comes out of master plans, studies, strategies, EAs, all 53 of those that we have. And that's actually the last point as well too. So, however, it doesn't mean that we still don't review those during the budget process, which we do. So, as council knows, we get most of our direction from those master plans, studies, and strategies that council has approved over the many past years. So we still look at them as we go through, but for the forecast purposes, those percentages do not include any new things. And again, I think this has been a consistent bullet for the last couple of years. Based on where we're at with staffing, based on where we're at with the tax rate increase, we don't really see the capacity to bring a lot of new things into the budget window. Very consistent with what's happened in the last couple of years. One of the things that's driving us, I guess the wrong way, for want of a better term, is assessment growth. And we have, for the last number of years, been definitely the highest growing municipality in Durham Region on assessment growth, and one of the highest in the province of Ontario. I think the lowest we've been out of 444 has been about 38, so we're very high. You can see 2013, we're forecasting 2.25% for assessment growth, which is a little lower. It's about 2.7% we were averaged in 10, 11, and 12. I can tell you 2.25% is very ambitious. As the report indicates, we're sitting right now, we're running at about 70% of where we are comparing 2012 over 2011. Right now, we're sitting at just about 1.16%. That's of a couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised, although we're really working with MPAC to get that number as high as we can, that we could be around the 2% mark for assessment growth. Probably still one of the highest in the region, but far from what we're accustomed to. In all honesty, we were quite surprised that 2012 and 2011 stayed as high as they did. Memory serves me right, there was nobody above 2% in 2011 or 2012 within the region except us. Most were in the 1.5, 1.7 range, down as low as 0.1 or 0.2%. So, and you can see in the forecast, when you look at it, we gradually ratchet that down over time. So we spent a lot of time looking at assessment growth and what some of those drivers are, because it's an issue that's going to become the norm going forward. So I'm pretty confident to say the days of 5.9 and 6% assessment growth are but a distant memory. So there's probably 5 key factors that are driving it, and one is just simply the reduction of the building permits that we've been issuing over the last number of years. Council knows, everybody knows, the recession somewhat hit in 2008. We were issuing 12, 14, 1,600 permits a year, single-family residential. We were very consistent the last number of years, in and around the 600 to 700 permit volume. But there's always a lag on assessment growth, because by the time a building permit is issued, the house is built, the house is occupied, and by the time it hits the assessment roll, not uncommon to have a lag of 4 to 5 years between when that we actually see the impact on assessment growth. So what we were seeing back in 10 and 11, 12, where our growth was still high, was permits that were issued back in 2004, 2005, and 2006. Kind of kept us propped up, if I can use that term. Now what we're seeing is the back end is what's happened in 2008, 2009, and 2010 is now what's hitting us. Going forward, at least the good news is we're still forecasting fairly consistent, still fairly high growth of residential permits. The other one is taxpayer appeals. As I say, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation and the Assessment Review Board are trying to clear a huge backlog in anticipation of the reassessment that's coming up in 2013. We're seeing, the ARB particularly, we're seeing more appeals being scheduled, more hearings being scheduled in October, November, and December of this year, and we've probably seen scheduled in the last 3 years. So of course, taxpayer appeals are not a good thing for us. They're good for the taxpayer individually, but as the town, that comes out of the assessment base. The provinces or ARB can constantly drive methodology changes. The most recent one that just happened in the last year was for about the 5th time in the last 7 years, totally redid how they do golf courses. So we did see somewhat of a reduction, not as bad as others did on golf courses, but we did see a significant assessment drop, particularly on golf courses. Luckily, there was appeals that were withheld, particularly with related to storage units as well as high-rise office buildings. The other one is what we call the town appeals. The town does appeal developers' properties. We don't appeal individual homeowners' properties. We started that back in 2003 with council's approval. So from 2003 to 2009, a 9-year period, we filed 86 successful appeals. We probably filed about 125 to 140 appeals. But we were successful in filing about, 86 appeals that generated literally hundreds of millions in additional assessment. As council knows, as we go through Greenfield and as properties go through the development process, as they farm, as soon as they put a piece of equipment on there, we send out the assessors and they start scraping land. We get it to move to the next level. We only have 4 appeals outstanding from that 2003 to 2009 period, and we filed no appeals in 2011 or 2012. So that was also a big driver, probably one of the biggest drivers in all honesty of keeping that higher assessment growth over the last 3 to 4 years. And lastly, the supplementary assessments or supplementary taxes that are added by MPAC every year. MPAC is doing a much better job and more timely basis on getting supplementaries. Supplementaries, of course, are where a property or a building is occupied during the year, and there's a supplementary assessment issued. A couple of years ago, and MPAC can go back the current year, plus they can go back 2 years to add somebody to the supplementary assessment roll. This year in 2012, we're seeing about 60% of the supplementaries being added are current year only, which is a very good thing. That means they're much more current. A couple of years ago, that number was probably only 35 to 40%. So in essence, because they were behind schedule, we were getting the benefit of somewhat artificially higher assessment growth. So something we're very much keeping our eye on going forward, but it is one of those things that, other than really going through the appeal process, is really beyond our control. So we definitely see assessment growth becoming one of the biggest challenges going forward, and going forward as soon as 2013. Council lists. I'm going to go through this first slide very easy and make it easy on council and staff on this one. There's two pieces on the council list, the operating budget as well as the capital budget and the long-range capital forecast. So the capital budget is, the operating budget, we're going to make it easy for council. There was 3 items identified by council. 30 small dollar items that we're quite comfortable that we can find the capacity at a staff level within the operating budget to include those. So traditionally we would ask for direction from council on these items, but because of the small dollar value, staff's quite comfortable just committing to council that they will appear in the 2013 budget. So on that, unless there's any questions on those 3 items, Madam Chair, I'll move to the next slide.
Any questions? Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay. The next one is the council list for the 20, sorry, I forgot to change my table. That should, of course, say 2013 capital budget and 2014 to 17 long-range capital forecast. Copy and paste is a wonderful thing. The council list has really been an effective tool. This is our 4th budget actually using the council list. We had a break because of the 2010 election where the whole budget process timing changed. But the process has really been effective, and it supplements the direction the council gives through the master plan and studies and strategies. So the first number of years, all we've asked for council is whether an item should be considered by staff in the preparation of the budget and the capital forecast. Not specifically that it's in or out, but should we consider it? And that has worked well. But as the process has moved forward, and to make it more effective, we've added another dimension this year to help staff in the preparation of the budget. As council knows, there's always, for want of a better word, a ripple effect when it comes to either in advancing an existing project, adding a new project, or increasing the scope of an existing project. And the ripple effect quite simply means, assuming that the tax rate increase cannot go above 2.75%, which is our assumption, that there's 3 things that have to happen to existing projects. Existing projects have to be deferred, existing projects have to be delayed, potentially even delayed right outside the 5-year window of the budget and the forecast, or deferred in scope. So that's the additional piece that we're looking this year from council. So it'll be a 2-part discussion on each item. Should staff consider it, yes or no? And if the answer is no, that staff shouldn't consider it after council's discussion, then we're done with that one. If the discussion is that staff should consider it, then that will trigger the next question about further direction on how we should try and fit that into the budget. Again, not direction, just some overall options for us to consider. Because I can tell you this is a struggle that we face as management committee, trying to balance the budget each year. As council knows, the amount of available funding falls quite short of the required demands. So it will just, from a staff perspective, we see it being a good level of direction. I think we've been very good at not surprising council come budget and forecast time, and I think this will just be a way to reinforce that process where we've got some direction. So Madam Chair, I don't know if there's any questions on this new process or everybody's comfortable with it.
I don't know.
We'll find out when we go through it, I guess.
Is there anything else you need to do?
Yeah, we actually need to go through there's 4 items we need to go through to get council's direction on.
These 4. Well, these 4, I know I was going to ask questions.
Yeah, so we're just going to go through them one by one.
Right.
And these are all general levy funded items. So what this means is they all directly have an impact on the tax rate. So the first one we have is a request to advance the Duffins playground replacement by a couple of years at a cost of $130,000. Just a bit of background on our playground replacement program. Like all our infrastructure maintenance is basically based on two things. The condition of the equipment, particularly as it relates to safety and just general condition, as well as the amount of use that it gets. So all our infrastructure maintenance is based on those two items. So if it's currently in 2013 or 2014, it's deemed by staff to be in worse state of repair and higher use. 2015 and beyond that just means it can last another couple of years. So that's the request, Madam Chair, and I'll turn it back to you to open up any discussion on whether or not staff should consider this item as we go into the capital budget.
Okay. Is there, Councillor Dice?
Thank you. This park was done not too long ago. Do you know when, Dave? It's not that old, it's new equipment.
Duffins Park, we do have it scheduled in the forecast right now for 2015. And as part of our regular sort of monthly inspections that have identified it within that time frame. We're still proposing that it's within that time frame at 2015 and aren't recommending that it be brought forward at this time.
So it's still in good condition?
Still in good condition for the next couple of years, and we feel that we've got higher priority playgrounds that need to be replaced in 13 and 14 ahead of this one.
And the reasoning for bringing it forward was the disrepair, do you know?
It's a councillor request, so I'll let the councillor who...
She's not here.
Okay. Well, Councillor Jordan brought it forward. I think I'm guessing it was just from request from residents, I would assume.
She said to me that the resident wanted her to bring it to council and for council to agree or disagree with it going forward at this time rather than 2 years from now. So I think that item 1, I think there's a general consensus that it's not at this time. Am I correct? Yep. Okay, thank you.
So if I can, Madam Chair, just on the next three, these are a little bit different where the first one was kind of project specific. So anyway, we'll go through each one and if any of them survive, then we'll worry about number B. So I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, just for discussion on,
okay.
On this item.
The advancement of Paradise Park, I brought this forward with Regional Councillor Jordan because of the high use down there and the need to have washrooms down there. That's why we wanted that one to be brought forward. Mayor Parrish.
Just a question, Mr. Ford, you've got this as general levy and I can understand that. Is there any potential alternate source for I take it this is just design work?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So is there any alternate source in terms of studies? I know this isn't, I can't see this being a DC pocket, but is there any potential alternate source in terms of parkland or anything that could potentially fund this other than general levy?
Through the chair, the only option would be Parkland Reserve Fund, although in the last probably 3 to 4 years, we've adopted a practice, not a policy. The Parkland, because of the demands of acquiring future parkland, we've only used Parkland Reserve Fund and kept it aside for the acquisition of future parkland.
Right.
So Parkland Reserve Fund would be an option. It's not one I would particularly recommend because we know that the future parkland purchases that we do have coming are greater than the balance we already have in Parkland Reserve Fund. We did look at whether we could squeeze something out of development charges, but it would have been a stretch at best. And even if you did, it might have been a couple percentage points. If I can be honest as well too, that the challenge on this one is going to be getting it into the budget once we know what it's actually going to cost us. So this is probably the easier of the two choices. Once we've got the design, then we'll get some idea of what the cost is. That's probably going to be the bigger challenge. But I wouldn't recommend moving away from general levy.
Well, that's my concern with this. We've done such great work on the waterfront, and I'm sure Councillor Brown and other councillors, especially in the South End, can confirm this. But the feedback we've gotten with respect to what we've done at Paradise Park Beach is been great. We're doing this Blue Flag Beach, Bring Back the Beach program, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that I think we really need to put the meat on the bones is that, you know, what exactly do we want to do there? What do we have the capacity to do, and over what time frame? And my concern is that if we don't have the design work done until 15, we won't know until 16 or whatever what we're looking at, and it will be in a long-range capital budget as an item in 2020. So I would like to support, I would like this one to go forward for consideration. I think it's important in terms of the town's priorities and what we want the waterfront to be, especially that area. So that's, and I'm very aware of the constraints, and I'm very aware of what a difficult budget year this is, as they all are, but I would really like to see this one at least have some further scrutiny to see whether we can do something there.
What I would like to know is, where have you got, is it in the general levy forecast for 2015?
Yeah, it's current, the design is currently in 15. This would move it forward to
So
2013.
it's a part of the increase in the general levy for 2015 in your forecast?
Well, it is currently in 2015, so to move it.
So where were you taking that money from? General
That's
levy or parkland?
My recommend, well, under our current practices, it would be general levy funded.
Okay.
I would not recommend moving away from that.
Any further questions on this? Does council wish to vote on this as to whether or not it should stay in the budget?
I think it's one
In
we
the
have to decide.
item for considerations? Yep. Okay. All right.
Okay, if I can, Madam Chair, that then now moves us into our first number D. So, and on these next three items, the direction is a little higher level, because of course, in order for us to move $75,000 into 2013, something worth $75,000 has to move out from 2013.
Without having a list of what these, where these things are, I don't think we can do that.
But we're not asking you specifically, we're asking at a very high level. So what we're saying is, if you want, if this one is going to be advanced, in order for staff, and we don't even have the list yet of what the capital is, you know, at this stage, but we want to know at a very high level, is council okay with us cutting or reducing some road resurfacing, reconstructions, sidewalk repairs? But we need it at a cloud level.
Depends on where.
Okay, I think we should
Not
take it
my
from the
word.
parkland.
Not my word. Not my word.
Yeah.
I think it should be taken from the parkland reserve, personally.
I take my direction from council, that would not be my recommendation, because we've kept that for future parkland, but I'm at council's wish.
Okay.
I think, Madam Chair, that we should, as much as possible, not try to compensate apples with oranges. I think if we're doing something that has to do with parkland design, parkland improvement, parkland replacement, et cetera, my general feeling would be that it should come from that cloud level category as opposed to road resurfacing, et cetera. So that would be my feeling.
And through the chair, that's exactly the type of high-level direction that we're looking at. So when we go to look at, as management committee, to move this forward, we will look for properties in that class, for want of a, or projects within that type of parkland redevelopment class to make that. But that's exactly the direction we need on those. That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the next one is just a bit of background on this one. We did look at an alternative funding source for this. We did look to build and repair reserve, but you know, considering we generally have used building repair reserve just for that, to repair where you've got, you know, HVAC, roof, and those types of things. So building repair reserve is not a funding option for this. And the other issue is it's such a new building that we haven't even closed the capital account yet, and the capital account doesn't have the capacity either. So we did, on all of these, we did look at other ways to try and make this fit, because we know general levy is the toughest one because it impacts. So we did look at building repair reserve, we did look at the existing capital account, and we were 0 for 2 on that. So it stays in general levy, and again, first step is whether we should be considering this to include this. This is not in, of course, the existing long-range capital forecast. This is a new item.
Yes, this is another of mine. There's been several, I wouldn't say several, at least 100 residents have said to me they like the St. Francis Centre, of what we've done to it to improve it, but they really do not like the blue frontage, and it takes away from the church. So I asked Howie to put this in to see if we could change it to the color to match what the church was. I was shocked when I saw this figure. I mean, I assumed it was windows with a bit of blue vinyl tacked onto it or something like that. What? I mean, this would be gold-plated windows, $90,000. Yes, Dick.
This is an actual price that was provided to us by the contractor. So it's not an estimate, it's an actual price the contractor provided to us. And it is the way, Catherine Bridgman is probably the better one to give you the technical explanation to it, but it is a real number.
So what makes them so expensive? I mean, isn't it window that's painted blue, or do they, I mean, how do they generate the blue color?
There's a whole tint to the window and the way in which they're manufactured and assembled within the frames as well. So it's not as straightforward as, you know, a film that gets removed and replaced.
And if it was replaced with clear glass, which is not acceptable, I understand that, it would be far less than that, right?
I would speculate yes, but I would
because the whole issue that I was told why you had the blue was because of privacy reasons, because the washrooms open up to the outside. So that's why that blue, well, the color started, and I don't know who chose the blue. But I think we could do something at a far less cost. I don't think that this has been pursued enough in my mind, but I'll see what other members of council have to say. And I see Mayor Parrish has his hand up.
Me again.
Me again.
Well, you know, to me, this is the one on the list that I couldn't even think twice about it. I mean, we've just done the St. Francis Centre. We saw the drawings and with the glass and the blue. I know that some people have had feedback, you know, that it doesn't look right, et cetera, but, you know, we had the very difficult situation of making that building usable, and we had to put a foyer on it. We could have put a massive brick square on the front of it, which would have been aesthetically a problem. We put one with blue glass on it. I heard comments with respect to blue glass from some people early on. I don't hear them anymore. I used to get a whole bunch of complaints about roundabouts till people figured out how to use them.
They've not learned how yet to use them yet.
Well, I don't get any complaints about them anymore. You know, this to me is one that, you know, I don't know what the lifespan of this glass is, but it's probably 15 or 20 years or something like that. It's going to have to be replaced. And then the council of the day can say, you know what, we'd like to do it in a tone that's the same as the brick, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to be here then, but my prediction is that when you try to do that, the blue glass in some people's mind will become so iconic that you won't be able to touch it.
You're probably right.
And you know what? You just can't please everybody. But to spend $90,000 of the taxpayers' money on something that we just put up in the last couple of years, to me, I just can't support. And you know, when it comes to replacing them, sure, let's take a look at it. But I assume they've got a good number of years of life left in them.
I agree. I wouldn't put my hand up for $90,000, but I was shocked at the amount. I think there may be a different way to do them. Councilor Dice.
Well, I think I'm in quite a happy place with St. Francis. I think, again, as the mayor said, put a lot of money into this. We were highly criticized during the election for putting the amount of money into this heritage property as we did. And I had to think it was worth every penny. And I think so does everybody who walks in those doors. Once you're inside, it's a different atmosphere. And I can't really justify going back and spending more money at this point in time when we're just getting this facility up and running and things are going really well. But I think overall people who have come in are more accepting of it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and it never will be, whatever you do.
So can we say that this is a non-starter?
I think that would.
Okay, thank you. Item 4.
The last one, Madam Chair, actually was from Councillor Jordan as well, too, a resident request. But I think Mr. Meredith can give a bit of background on this project.
This was an item that had previously come up about 7 or 8 years ago, and then had been somewhat quiet. There was a design done for a center island bulb within this court, and in part it was sodded, and there was also some parking that had been incorporated within that design. At that time, around 7 or 8 years ago, we had prepared a cost estimate. We'd expressed some concerns just from an operations standpoint as far as maintenance goes, dealing with winter control, grounds maintenance, and so forth. It's been quiet for the last 7 or 8 years, and then from a staff perspective, it's been quiet.
Councillor Jordan was requested by the resident to bring it before council for council to make a decision as to whether or not to go ahead. Is there any?
Just a question to whoever can answer that. Mr. Meredith, when would Barnard Court in the normal course come forward for any kind of significant road work?
It's not within the forecast right now. It is a court, so it is a lower order road in terms of traffic volume. So it wouldn't be at the top of the priority list. And as I said, it's not in the forecast, but it's something that we've done our pavement conditions. So I know sort of what its grading is, or I can find out, but it's not in the short term.
Well, I think that, you know, and I know the gentleman who keeps bringing this forward, and Barnard, I don't know, the design of it was before my time, but it is an extremely large bulb. It's larger than the normal bulb and could easily accommodate some green space and an island there. But to consider doing something on it outside the context of a significant road work on Barnard, I just don't think is appropriate, especially in 2013. But I think that staff should certainly put a flag on it that when this does come into the capital budget forecast, that it should be costed as to what, in the context of an overall contract, that addition would cost. Because in an overall contract, it might not have as significant a cost as it otherwise would. That would be my comment.
Councillor Dias.
Just Mr. Meredith, can you refresh my memory? The issue is about parking, is it not?
That's the key component of it, yes.
Well, just so you do know, every election brews its head. As soon as you knock on the door, it's back empty. So and I think that's why it's come back at this point too, because they were really adamant about it a couple of years ago. It's a lot of money.
Okay, I think that's direction for you. The only other item I have was probably is an operations thing, was emptying the garbage more frequently at Roving Park and along the lake in the summer months. Is that included in here?
Well, Mr. Meredith speaks now. I did speak to Regional Councillor Jordan about that, who had brought it forward as well. There's not really it's not really a budget impact item, that's more operational in terms of how we can support it from a staff perspective. Yeah. It's not a resource issue, it's something that we do in-house, and it's a matter of perhaps revisiting, and I've spoken to Amanda Brown, our customer service sort of coordinator dealing with special events on weekends, in terms of how we might be able to look at different times in which we're emptying garbage cans so that they're not potentially sort of left full overnight so that the animals get out for the following morning.
Okay.
On that point, I know many of us get down to the waterfront during the weekends during the summer, and I've noticed, and this is nothing new, but the amount of usage by extended family groups, organizations, et cetera, to put on barbecues and things like that. Some of these are not just 5 or 6 people. Some of them are 30, 40, 50, 100 people. And what is our policy on, do we permit that? And in other words, permit it? And is there a cost? Because I've seen situations that I've passed on a Sunday where there's a large gathering, and I've happened to be by there on the Monday morning before our staff has got in. And some of those users are extremely responsible and treat it like their own backyard.
And some of them treat it like their neighbor's backyard, and it's a mess. And I'm just wondering that, you know, it's a real privilege to be able to use that. And I'm wondering if we have a permitting system that says, you know, you can use that, but here's the permit fee, and it's $300. And by the way, you'll get, you'll get most of that back if you leave it in a pristine condition. And, you know, because I don't know if the taxpayer, at the end of the day, should have to be paying for those types of things. I don't know what our practice is there.
We do have, as you know, there's the 4 designated permit areas down in and around Rotary Park. We also have the Lions Point shelter. So we've got 5 permitted areas that are increasingly becoming more and more popular. And part of the role that staff do is checking and verifying sort of permit holders are using those locations. There are people from time to time that do locate there without permits, so there are some conflicts that Amanda in particular has to resolve each weekend. I think there's a couple of things that we're trying to do in terms of whether it's garbage locations, but there's also the number of barbecues that people are bringing there as well. And I know Councillor Dyes and I have had a number of discussions in terms of disposing of charcoal, and one of the items that we do have captured in our budget for 2013 is to incorporate those down along the waterfront so they can be disposed of properly, as opposed to the base of trees that you typically find on the Sunday or Monday. So we do recognize...
Or a garbage pail that burns up.
Or a garbage pail that burns up. So we do recognize the increasing usage and that the maintenance just from a garbage and debris standpoint is becoming a bigger challenge, and I think we need to sort of in the off-season sort of revisit in terms of looking at what changes we can make to better support that and make the necessary improvements.
Thank you.
Anything further?
That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Skinner, you're up next. Staff 2013 through 16.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. White.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to present the 2013-2016 staffing plan. I'm going to be brief because, as you're aware, we presented the whole 12 and 13 plan together last year with the job descriptions and everything. So because of the ARC piece, we will hire the manager this year, and we're hiring the 6 other positions in ARC in early 2013. Those being the 3 pool operators, recreation supervisor, an aquatic supervisor, and a CSR, customer service representative. The staffing levels are in the report, and I sent out 2 things. I sent out the job descriptions. Could you just pass those along, please? I sent out the job descriptions to council in an email on the 27th, so that we could refresh our memories about what the positions were. And I've got handouts that are just going around now as well. Another piece that we wanted to highlight in the report was the vacancies. And when senior management look at vacancies, we look at them with very careful scrutiny. We look at them from the position, first of all, do they need to be filled? Second of all, if they need to be filled, if so, in what capacity? And third, could the position be necessarily deployed to another department? Also in the report, you'll see, as Mr. Ford alluded to earlier, with the exception of ARC, there were no new full-time positions added, or will be no new full-time positions added from 2011 to 2013. Positions currently being considered in 2014 through 2016 are listed. And at the appropriate time, what we'll do is we'll bring those forward. So this time next year, we'll bring the 2014 positions forward with the appropriate job description so that council has the idea of what some of those jobs entail. And of course, positions in the long-range forecast are only those that we thought might be fundable and that were able to be funded based on the 2.75. That we've got for the tax rate increase over the years. However, our needs are, as you are very well aware, far greater than that. Not only for full-time positions, but also for part-time resources in response to our current growing community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Questions? Oh, Councillor Dyes.
I have to say I have a concern, I guess, about staffing, because it seems that we're stretched pretty thin as it is, and this is the short list, obviously. How long are we going to be able to do this for? It's going to come. We've got more buildings to maintain and clean, and more programs then to book.
Madam Chair, the short answer is I don't see us being able to change it in any time soon. Recognizing that we're in a 2.75 world, recognizing the demands that we have on us already. Our financial capacity, what you have before you is roughly what we hope we have financial capacity to support in those years. But it's at least double that list. And to the credit of the directors around the table, they've thinned out their requests to respond to that and recognize that themselves. And it doesn't speak to, again, a growing need for part-time resources to support all of those things. So, what we've told you many times is that we're okay with that, but there is a capacity issue. And as long as you're patient that it takes us longer to get to a project or undertake some research or to provide you a report or whatever, then that's okay. And as long as our residents are okay with that too and are patient, then we can make that happen in a 2.75 world. If we don't, then the reality is we need to turn our mind to more dollars at the end of the day to support the financial resources. These staff here, roughly equate to about 0.5% a year, but then you need to look at it, the compounding effect year over year, so that gets you the 1%. And I would say right now that I'm not confident that 2014 will have financial capacity even for the ones that we're showing you there. Because when you put the demands of a budget together, when you look at hydro and gas and salaries and everything else, and other general levy capital projects, Mr. Ford, there's about $33,000 is about what we have to add to the general or to the operating budget forecast for capital projects this year, which is a drop in the bucket. So we have no room to grow there and to look at resources. We're in this situation for the longer term, unless council is prepared to move off that 2.75, even if it's in small ways. And as you know, for many years and consistently for many years, we've been far below what our comparators are. And maybe it's time to be saying that maybe 2.75, while I know politically and I know residents see that as a nice place to be, but 3.25 is still not a bad number, and that extra 0.5% would have a significant positive impact on our capacity to get stuff done.
If I may, the reason I bring it up, I mean, we've been doing this for quite some time now. That's my feeling. And, staff, there's a natural attrition, of course, with staffing, but I think when you're understaffed, it's very stressful for the staff here who are working longer hours. And then, I'm curious, do we track then the reasons for leaving, and is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think those that have left, in the past year, I would suggest no, the workload hasn't been an issue. But, with the great amount of respect, our staff are working at capacity, many of them, and have little capacity to take on extra things. And we do have a group of employees who go above and beyond the call on a very regular basis, and that's because they're passionate and dedicated and all of those good things. But it's also, I think, a reflection that they see that there's a demand for work, and so they're trying to be the responsible employee, and thankfully so, and getting stuff done. And thankfully, to council's credit, we've sort of said to you, we can't do it all and all at once. And so, as you know, this term of council, the number of corporate initiatives have been weaned down to what we think is a much more manageable number, and that certainly has helped. But again, speaking to your point, long term, it's not sustainable for sure. We have to turn our mind to either changes in services and service levels, which of course we know, our residents don't want, or we need to turn our mind to new revenues, additional revenues to make that happen. And our staff have looked at ways of streamlining business and efficiencies, and there's a little left there. there's not much, nowhere else really to turn. And we struggled with this and talked about this at length, throughout the year, across departments and within departments. But the short answer is it is going to take more dollars to make that happen.
Right.
And again, I know in this economy where the world has significantly changed, that's a tough pill for people to swallow. But at some point, we are going to have to turn our mind to it and to say that 2.75. Well, okay, we just can't make this happen.
Thank you.
Anything further?
I'll move
Moved by Mayor Cash. All those in favor? Thank you. Mr. Berger, you're next. On the Recreation Center.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you regarding the public art features at the Albany Recreation Center and the criteria associated with these pieces. Earlier this year, Council approved amendments to the Art and Public Spaces policy, and the accompanying report identified ARC as an approved priority location for public art. Working with Operations and Environmental Services, 2 locations have been identified for art installations at the site, one interior and one exterior. So outlined here on the screen by the red arrow, the interior location has been identified as a section of the main corridor south wall outside the youth room. The wall space measures approximately 3 by 6 meters, and although the art piece does not need to fit or encompass that entire area, this space will serve as a graphic focal point for those accessing amenities in the east wing of the facility, such as the gymnasium, the fitness and dance studio, the children's space, and the community room. The exterior location has been identified as the main entrance plaza, identified here by the red rectangle, although the exact placement of the piece will be determined through the design submissions. Through this art piece, we have the opportunity to provide presence and context to those accessing the facility. The current balance of the public art reserve is $177,800. Staff recommend a budget not to exceed $7,000, including all artist fees and taxes for the interior piece, and that the call for the exterior piece state a budget of no more than $40,000, including all artist fees and taxes. Staff recommend the following design considerations be included in the call for design proposal: that the piece intrigue viewers and stimulate imagination, that the piece is suitable for all ages, that it reflect Ajax's history, heritage, culture, diversity, and/or natural elements or landscapes, and that it resonate with the public. That the piece respond to the site's general environment through an expression of the location's users and uses, and that it connect viewers to the art in an innovative way, and that it is safe, durable, low maintenance, and long-term in intent. In addition, functional art, such as benches or bicycle racks, will be considered. However, submissions of fountains or water features will not be entertained at this time. As mentioned earlier this year, Council has approved the amendments to the Art and Public Spaces policy, and this included clarifying Council's role in the public art review process. Council now has the ability to provide input to staff prior to the undertaking of any public art project, identifying any criteria they may wish to include for that particular commission or call. This is in addition to providing final approval on all recommended public art projects after the pieces have been reviewed by the staff review panel and the new public art review panel. Council's input in identifying any criteria for both of these pieces of public art will help to inform the competition call and commission process. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the pieces, as well as take any additional criteria that you may wish to add to help us inform the competition call process.
Thank you, Councillor Dyes.
Thank you. I'm glad you clarified the size of the wall in the art. Thank you. I thought, wow, I'm a huge billboard there. And the reason I was thinking of that is because it's a corridor. So I guess for the community, just to keep in mind that in a corridor, you have limited space to stand back and actually view the work. So if it's too big, you won't be able to see it. So there was that. And just with the outdoor art piece, do you know what else is going out there outside? Are they going to have it'll be away from any kind of bike racks or anything like that. Sometimes they clump things
Yeah, I'm not
together.
100% sure where the bike racks are located on that. Are they?
The location of the art piece wouldn't conflict with any existing site furniture. It's more along the buildings or around the perimeter of the space.
And just the other question I have that's unrelated, I guess, to this is that this is the last building, I take it, we're going to be doing for quite some time. And we have never made any provision for the old art piece that was commissioned originally when the town hall was built in the 60s. And I know what you're thinking, it's the chicken without its head, and it's, oh, the groaner. But it was commissioned as at the first town hall that was placed here, and it's part of our history. And I know that the condition is such that it can't be placed outdoors again and again and used as a fountain, but it could be placed somewhere indoors. So can staff look at that? Are we going to use this piece, or are we going to deconcession?
Yeah, through the chair, I did check through the policy, and as you know, deaccessioning a piece of art is a serious sort of project to undertake, because it was an original commission. But in looking at the process, and I'd have to talk to, was it operations that did the first assessment of that it could not be used as a fountain or
It was a
outdoors?
consultant that did it through operations.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we could do is review that with staff, as well as the new public art review panel that will be coming into place, and we could sort of assess the condition of the piece and sort of go through there. Can it be used? If it can be used on the indoors as another art feature, perhaps we could find a space somewhere.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Just a couple of comments. The location for the interior piece, is that the only location that's possible?
From what we've ascertained, yeah, it's the larger piece.
Okay, well, just a couple of comments. I'm assuming that the exterior piece is going to go through a process. I assume it's going to be something that I would generally call sculpture of some kind, and that's appropriate, and I would judge as to what that is. But I do think that the Audley Recreation Facility is in a very new part of town. It's in a part of town where, although there are some longtime residents, there are a lot of new residents, and it's a young demographic. And it's, I think, perhaps a section of the community that may not be that familiar with the town's history, right from the colonial days, and even before that, right up through the DIL days, et cetera, and all the history. And I would think that it's an important opportunity to inform through art features of that history. So, for example, and I think Councilor Dye's point with respect to a big piece and in a corridor is a good one, but to me, something on a wall may well take the form of something more akin to a painting or a landscape or whatever. And it might be an opportunity to, through that kind of pictorial thing, I'm not an artist, and everybody praises the Lord for that, but it might be an opportunity to incorporate those features into it.
Absolutely.
And I think that it would be, very educational and really, in a very concrete way, talk about those things through art. So that's just my 2 cents worth. I don't know whether, and again, I'm not an expert in this, I don't know whether $7,000 is enough to do that properly. And I would like to see it done properly. We're spending more, I think Mr. Ford confirmed this, more than we've ever spent on a building before to do this building right. And I think that, those are going to be major features in it, and if it costs a little bit more than that, then we should do that.
Sure. And again, through the chair, I think that's council's decision to make if you'd like to increase that.
Well, I don't have any idea. To me, $7,000, you might be able to get just a fantastic piece for that. I'm not an expert in that, but it would seem to me that I wouldn't want to dissuade and send away people who could do a first-rate job on that because they looked at it and said, it's not a $7,000 job. That's just a thought.
Madam Chair, maybe what I would suggest is we put something, a limit on it, say no more than $10,000. But the St. Francis one, just so you have an idea, was about $5,000. So
the interior piece,
the inside piece. So in terms of the wall space, the width anyhow is roughly about the width that you have here. The height is different in terms of its piece, but it's in terms of that scale, I think we're probably okay with something maybe no more than $10,000 would be my suggestion that would work, but this maybe doesn't limit it. And so if council's okay with that, then
we've got a list of people that want to speak. Councillor Crawford.
I actually love that idea because the mayor is absolutely correct in the fact that the north is disconnected to the history of Ajax, and I think if we were to even replicate some of these really older pictures that were demonstrated at the Bomb Girls Night and be able to put those in some sort of platform and with a descriptor of what had happened along a wall, almost like a walk through Ajax, past to present, I think it would be a really, really nice idea to add to the modern piece of this building to capture the history of Ajax. And I think it would be very valuable to help connect the north to the history of Ajax.
Down at the waterfront at the Veterans Point Gardens, that's where it started out as historical gardens, and there's parts of the lands and the farms that were expropriated, and there's a DIL and all of that. And I don't know if that would be what should be replicated. Because whenever I drive by that, there's always somebody there reading a canon. So.
And with kids getting swimming lessons, there's always parents hanging around looking at, whatever. So I think why not learn more about Ajax?
Councillor Dyes, and then you.
Just quick, I would support your point about the cost. I had the same conversation with Mr. Gruber because in a way it's being very prescriptive to the artist already as to what they can do. It has to be a painting because anything else would be too much money and they couldn't do it for that cost. And $1,000 of that is taxes as well, so you're paying them $6,000. So yeah, I think if we want anything that's a little bit different and some different ideas coming forward anyway, I think you're going to have to do that.
Councillor Ashby.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is I like the criteria used at Shell Station at Salem and Taunton. I thought that was a good balance between who lives there now and that's basically speaking to the residents that live there. So I'm not an artist, but I think those set of criteria were good. And if you could go beyond that and also try to incorporate more of the historical aspect of the town, I don't know how to do it, but that's just my thoughts.
My question was that I'm not an artist, as you know, but I thought that there was too many criteria, and I thought, how can they incorporate all of those items? You had history, or do can they choose a couple of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the way I read that was that they had to have all of those aspects in it.
No, and I can make that clear in the call.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Okay.
So I guess we're down to history and
present day.
And present day, yeah.
That's right.
Another question I have: do you have a list in mind as to what that money is going to be used for? I know the part has to go to Pat Bailey Square, but are there other places that we're thinking of to put public art?
Yes, the report that I brought forward earlier this year had, I think, over the next 5 years,
I'm sorry, I
locations
forgot
that were
about
generated.
that.
Yeah. So I if I recall correctly, I think the Greenwood Pavilion, there was something there, Ajax Community Center, and definitely ARC and Bailey Square. So
Yeah,
those were.
I remember it now that you said that. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? So would you like us to change that?
I don't think it needs to be
No.
changed, Madam Chair. I think we've given input into it, and I'll move it as is.
That's great. Thank you very much for that.
No, up to 10.
Up to 10?
10,000.
Right?
That was the direction.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Nicole, you're up next.
I am.
6-5.
Last one.
Last but not least.
We knew you'd be here anyways.
I'll be quick too, I promise.
That's a good.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm here looking for the direction of the committee on the candidate contribution rebate program. And I just have a very brief presentation which will provide just a quick background on the program and review a number of modifications to the program that we're recommending. So this program was introduced in 2000 with an aim to bolster contributions from individual citizens to candidate campaigns so that candidates could hopefully become less dependent on corporations and developers to finance their campaigns. And also to hopefully increase citizen participation in elections by making it a little bit more affordable for individuals to donate to a campaign of one's choosing, and just generally to create a little bit more interest in municipal elections. Ajax was very much on the cutting edge with this program. The only other city at the time that had such a program was the city of Toronto, and that was a bit of a different animal. There's now 7 rebate programs among Ontario municipalities, and most of them were based on the Ajax model when they were introduced. Now, without getting into the specific details of the program, it provides a rebate to electors who make donations of $25 or more to a candidate, up to a maximum rebate of $150. The program was updated in 2005 to add the stipulation that only contributions made prior to Election Day, or I should say up to and including Election Day, would be considered eligible for a rebate. And the rationale behind that is basically that we feel rebates should only be provided for contributions made to assist a candidate in getting elected, not to help a candidate to finance their campaign deficit. Otherwise, the program's never been modified in any real significant way. The funding formula has never been changed. The minimum eligible contribution and maximum possible rebate are all the same as they were when the program was introduced just prior to the 2000 election. So the report in the agenda package contains a bit of an analysis of the program's impact on various aspects of the election, which should hopefully provide a basis for members of this committee to assess whether there's value in continuing that program for the 2014 election. Should the committee determine that the program is meeting its objectives and should be continued, then staff are recommending a number of small tweaks to the program that hopefully will just modernize it a little bit and improve how it's administered, and I'd like to highlight some of those now. So the first recommendation is that the bylaw be revised such that it only applies to the next municipal election and then would have to be renewed prior to each subsequent election. This is intended essentially just to put a check in place which will require council to review the program prior to each election just to ensure that it continues to be effective. It also allows each new council to consider the program and decide if it's something they want. An increase in the minimum eligible contribution to $50 is also being proposed, which will bring Ajax a little bit more closely in line with comparator municipalities. Markham and Ottawa, for example, will have a $50 minimum eligible contribution. Oakville and Vaughan are $100, so we're on the low end. Next, staff are proposing that the rebate be calculated using a flat rate of 75%, up to the $150 maximum. So right now, the town provides a rebate of 75% for the first $100 and then 50% of the remaining contribution up to the max of $150. And the proposed change is just intended to make the program a little bit easier to administer and simpler for participants to understand. And an analysis indicates that this would have very little effect on program cost, $1,000, $2,000, maybe not even any at all. And as you know, this isn't a particularly expensive program. Rebates issued in the last election were around $10,600. The recommendations on this slide are pretty minor in nature. Firstly, we'd like to impose a cutoff date after which the rebate applications will no longer be accepted. And this is standard among programs elsewhere, and I think will make administration of the program easier and a little bit cleaner so that all the expenses of the program are incurred in the same year. We're also proposing that we strengthen the wording around the clerk's ability to deny rebates should a candidate fail to comply with the filing requirements of the Municipal Elections Act, or should their financial statement on its face show a major violation of the Act. So what the intention of this is just to provide an incentive for candidates to actually submit their financial statements. And this doesn't mean that the clerk is going to pour over anyone's financial statement, but if on its face it's evident that a candidate has, say, overspent by $10,000, then the town could justifiably withhold rebates to that candidate's donors. Now, the report also notes a number of other potential modifications that the committee may wish to consider but aren't being explicitly recommended at this time. The first would be to extend eligibility beyond just electors, recognizing that Ajax is home to many new residents who might not be eligible to vote in municipal elections just yet. So this program might provide an alternative means of participation for residents in that vote. But that said, this, I think, would present some real administrative challenges in terms of obtaining proof of eligibility, so age, address, that sort of thing. Another consideration would be to allow contributions made after election day to be eligible for a rebate. And this is actually the norm among other rebate programs. At this time, Ajax and Whitby are the only municipalities that deny eligibility for post-election day contributions. But we're still recommending that Ajax stick with the status quo on this one for the reason I mentioned earlier, that we believe eligible contributions should be to get a candidate elected, not to help them finance the deficit. And finally, the committee may wish to consider raising the maximum possible rebate, which again has never been modified since the introduction of the program. But that said, the existing maximum of $150 still falls neatly in line with our comparator municipalities, so we're not recommending the change at this time. And just once again, we're looking for the committee's direction today on whether the program should be continued at all, and if it's determined that it should be, we're seeking your endorsement of the recommended changes to the rebate program bylaw that are outlined in the report. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nicole. Questions? Mayor Parrish?
Not a question, Madam Chair, just a comment. I agree with the report. I think the modifications recommended are appropriate. I think councils should look at this once per term and make any modifications that they deem appropriate. However, I do think that after 12 years, and by the next election, 14 years, an adjustment to the maximum is appropriate. And I look at the schedule, and they range from 150 to 200 in Oakville. I would see no difficulty in raising Ajax's maximum to 200. The cost implication, according to the deputy clerk's report, is minimal, and just in inflation terms alone, $150 at 2,000 is worth at least $200 today. So I think that's appropriate. So with that modification, and I put it forward as an amendment as appropriate, Madam Chair, I would support the report.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do we take this as a friendly amendment to increase the maximum to 200?
I think we should take a vote on that.
I know, I'm gonna call a vote. First of all, is
I'll move the amendment just to make it easy. I'll move the amendment to the max from 150 to 200.
Yeah.
It's an unfriendly amendment.
Yeah. So there's amendment on the floor to increase the maximum to $200 and you could get a rebate. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The motion is amended. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Are there any departmental updates?
I just, thank you, Madam Chair. I just picked out a couple I thought would be of interest to council. In terms of the medallion site at the corner of Harwood and Bailey, we are, the signing of that site plan by medallion is imminent. We're expecting it to be done today or tomorrow at the latest. So following the signing of that site plan agreement and the enactment by the mayor and clerk in Ajax, then the property can close, and they will then be paying the town the remaining 4.5 million that's owed. And then, as you probably know, that brings the payment to 5 million, and there's up to 9 million that's paid to the town, and that's staged as the development occurs. You'll see at the council meeting on Tuesday night, a bylaw that is included in the package to remove the H on the property. They plan to mobilize the site mid to near the end of October and start servicing is to commence November 1st. Following the servicing, which could take up to 2 months, they will move directly to excavation, shoring, and a foundation permit before the end of the year. And another, I think, application worth noting is we just received a site plan application for an Infinity car dealership, and that's just one lot to the east of the BMW site. And the owner of that site actually has a concept plan proposing a premium auto sales and service node with a number of dealerships there. He's also pursuing Land Rover, Jaguar, and Porsche.
None of which I can afford.
I know. I said, who can afford those things?
It's amazing, actually, that he owns the BMW dealership, and I guess they've had record year of sales.
Really?
You see BMWs everywhere when you used to see them, one or two.
I
don't
always say,
understand
there's a
either.
lot of money out there, it's just I don't have it.
Just on building permit updates, just because we haven't done this since before the summer, a couple of noteworthy building permits I'm sure council will want to know about. The RioCan site on Taunton Road is scheduled for issuance is the building just east of Sobeys, which is a Good Life Fitness, 24,000 square foot, and a dollar store. That brings 2 fitness facilities. As you probably know, the Gold's Gym is under construction now on the Perlane site at the northeast corner of Roslyn and Salem. And also some really good news about the Perlane site. Permits have been issued for the first floor of the 4-story medical building for an urgent care clinic, an optometrist, a dentist, and a pharmacy. Those tenant finishing permits have been issued. And on the 2nd floor, permits are being reviewed for a doctor's office complex. And look at those drawings, look really good.
Just want to let members of council know that.
Thank you. Is there any other updates? None. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.